If you are currently in a season of growth right now, either in life or in your business, chances are you are facing some discomfort. I certainly am. And today's episode is really all about that, because anything we want in life is standing on the other side of either an uncomfortable lesson or sometimes it's an uncomfortable conversation. And really the only question is, will you lean in to that discomfort? Today's episode is really just a reminder that yes, growth is uncomfortable for all of us, but sister, you are totally strong enough to handle it. Welcome back to the show. I'm so grateful that you're tuning in today. And I have a quick favor to ask. If you have been loving this show, could you just do us a quick favor and leave a review in iTunes? If you have an iTunes account, this literally takes 30 seconds to do, and it might seem like the smallest thing, but it actually makes a huge difference in helping us to impact more people with this show. It helps us get guests that you really want to learn from on the podcast. And I know for years I've been a podcast listener, and really until starting one, I didn't realize how big of a difference it makes to leave reviews for the shows that I love. You are probably like me, and your iTunes podcasts are full of, or your podcast library is full of shows that you listen to on a daily basis. You feel like you're besties with the show host. And there were so many shows that have impacted my life in huge ways that I'd never left a review for. And so one day I just sat down, I committed that I was going to leave a little love on all of my favorite shows. And just know that if you take the time to do that, it really does make a huge difference, whether it's for this show or just a podcast that you truly love and really want to show that person who pours their time into creating the content for you that you love it. So that's my little PSA for you today, is leave reviews for your favorite shows. And if this is one of your favorites, I am totally honored and would absolutely love to know what you're loving about it, what you want to hear more of, or just an episode that really resonated with you. So all you have to do is go to iTunes, go to ratings and reviews, and click write a review. And that's where you do that. So thanks in advance just for even considering it and for listening today. It just makes all the difference that just to know that people are listening and loving the show. When you share it on your Instagram or, share it with friends, it's the smallest thing, but it makes all the difference. And today, I am especially grateful for this girl gang because I want to have just a really honest conversation. And I'm just so grateful that I have the kind of community where I can show up exactly how I am and just share what I'm going through, knowing that one of you out there, at least one person probably is dealing with the same thing and needed to hear this. And the same goes for you. When you show up and you share the things that you're going through at that moment, you're usually feeling called to share that lesson or that message because someone else is going through it too and needs to know that they're not alone. So my hope today is that because I've been feeling that same way, someone out there needed to hear this. And I really just want to talk about how uncomfortable growth can really be. And, I don't know how long you've been following Powerhouse Women or following my journey or following this show, but in the last 2 years, a ton of opportunities have come my way, our way as far as the brand Powerhouse Women, but even just me personally, a lot of opportunities have come. And it's things that I've been working my whole life for. It's all the things that, imagine when you're sitting there at the start of your journey and you're really envisioning what this could look like for your life and the impact you can make. And then that stuff starts to happen. We think that we're just going to feel on top of the world at that point. At least I did. I always thought that, okay, when I reach this certain level of income or certain level of impact, when our events sell out or when, our podcast hits the top of the charts, then I'll be happier. I'll feel so fulfilled. And while all of these opportunities have been so incredibly beautiful, and especially just in the last 3 or 4 months, a lot bigger opportunities are starting to come our way. what's been surprising, but then as I really think about it, it shouldn't be surprising, is that with these incredible breakthroughs has actually come a lot of discomfort. I've been, more blessed in the last couple of months than maybe ever before, but I've actually felt more triggered and really uncomfortable. So this isn't to say that, to burst anyone's bubble, that when you reach these goals that you have been working toward, that it doesn't feel as good as you thought. That's not my point at all. My point is that because I've done so much work around this, I know that with these greater blessings come greater responsibility and often just bigger growth, and growth is freaking uncomfortable. So while I'm equally just grateful to a level I can barely describe, I'm just so humbled by the opportunities that have come my way, I also am really uncomfortable. But I also know that that's worth it, and that this is the ultimate catch-22 of working to become the best versions of ourselves, working to make progress and growth, is that, we think that at the end of this rainbow, if you will, that there is this place where we've made it and we feel confident all the time and there's ultimate freedom and fulfillment. And I think there are absolutely new levels of all of those things available to us all the time. But I always used to think that, I was working toward this place where I just felt good all the time. And the catch-22 of this whole thing is that as humans, we're really just wired to make progress. And, progress inevitably involves growth, which the whole point of this podcast episode is that growth is uncomfortable. So in a way, to reach our fullest potential and all these things we always imagined, these huge goals and outcomes that we want, it's not always going to feel good. And I think at some level, I believed a few years ago that you get to a point where it just doesn't feel uncomfortable anymore. But all I can say is that at this point in the journey, that is not the case. And that reaching my fullest potential doesn't always feel good, but it absolutely has always led to new levels of freedom and confidence and abundance. I mean, way beyond what I ever imagined. So I really want this episode to prove as just a reminder for all of us, but especially to speak to those of you who are feeling really, really uncomfortable right now, to encourage you that the discomfort, especially when it gets really intense and acute, usually means that there's a huge breakthrough on the other side. But I want to start by sharing this. This was one of the biggest aha moments that I ever had, because I've shared a lot before, just really openly, how I was always afraid of leaning into that discomfort. When things got uncomfortable, it was when I wanted to pull back and play smaller and not really challenge myself. But I can't remember who originally said it. I've heard a couple of people talk about this, where there is just as much discomfort in staying the same. I was just as uncomfortable when I was staying the same and ignoring my bigger call, or just playing smaller than I knew I was really meant to play in life. And what I was afraid of was this discomfort that came on the other side of stepping into that feeling that I was meant for more. But when I really thought about it, there was just as much discomfort from staying the same. I think it was just that the discomfort of staying the same felt familiar. I knew what that discomfort felt like, and the discomfort of really going all in was something new to me, which made it feel scarier, even though it was just as uncomfortable. But this was where my mind was really changed in just looking at the idea of growth and discomfort altogether, is that at least the discomfort that comes from stepping into your bigger purpose offers the potential of a huge blessing on the other side. I mean, that was just that was such a mic drop for me, because think about it. If you're like me and you're maybe in a season where you're feeling the discomfort, you might be feeling the discomfort of staying still and not moving toward your bigger purpose that's really asking for your attention right now. That there's really no end in sight to that discomfort. If you stay the same, the resistance, the tension that builds up from not pursuing your bigger purpose it's just going to gnaw at you. And oftentimes that'll end up spilling over into our relationships. It'll end up spilling over into other areas of our life that really matter to us. But deep down, it's all coming from this place of ignoring a bigger calling that you're meant for. But at least the discomfort that comes from stepping into whatever that bigger calling is on your life, your bigger purpose, at least there's the potential that by stepping into that discomfort, there is the opportunity for a huge blessing or for a lesson, for growth on the other side. So I almost think of it like if you've ever been in an airplane or, changed altitudes where the pressure in your ear builds up to where that if the pressure builds up enough, it'll pop, hopefully, and, it'll pop and your ear will equalize and the pressure will release and it'll feel better. Versus if you just keep allowing that pressure to build and build and build, that's where it can pop and it can actually damage your eardrum. So I feel like it's the same thing when we talk about our personal growth, that we always have a chance to resist the pressure that's building up, that feeling that we're meant for more. And if we resist it long enough, that's where it blows up in ways that can damage, our life or relationships that we have. Versus if we lean into the pressure and lean into the discomfort, that's where, our personal growth, just like our ears, start to equalize, and they release the pressure before it gets to the point of actual pain. And that's at least what it's looked like in my life. I just was preparing for this episode and actually just sat down to write about some of the most uncomfortable things that have happened to me in the last 2 years, and stuff that, rarely do people even know that this has happened or that I've been going through it. Not because I've been trying to hide it, but just because a lot of these have been really personal struggles or personal discomfort that, when I'm in it in the moment, that's not really the right time or the appropriate time to share, because I'm still in it. I'm dealing with the repercussions and the emotions that come along with it. But these are some of the biggest teachers that I've had in this journey over the last 2 years. And anything that you see as far as favorable outcomes or growth, opportunity, abundance that you see happening in my life or within the Powerhouse Women brand and community, all of this has come, I can say without a doubt, because of these really, really uncomfortable situations and tests, really. And so just a few of them that came to mind as I was really thinking about this and preparing for this episode. One of the biggest ones is just relationships changing and certain friendships ending sometimes, because not all people are meant to be on our journey with us forever. And some are going to be there for a season. Some are going to come into your life to help you learn a lesson. And so when I think about, resisting this growth, those are the times that I think when I was holding on for dear life to a relationship or, staying in a friendship really out of more my people-pleasing tendencies than my true desire to be in a friendship or relationship with that person. And nothing at all against them at all. This was all my stuff, but I just knew that I had outgrown the relationship. But instead, to make the other person comfortable or make them happy, I would just stay. And then I would be resentful, and I wouldn't show up as the person I wanted to be in that relationship anyway. And so some of those lessons were the really painful ones, where your eardrum bursts and it just gets messy. I think the other one, and this is something not a lot of people even know about, but this was one where probably the messiest blow up of my resistance to growth happened. And that really came around this situation that unraveled, really just pointing me to how much my identity was firmly tied to other people's approval. And it happened in a way that just really kind of blew up in my face, and with a friendship that blew up, and all because I was so much more committed to people liking me than to being who I truly was. I was always going into relationships asking, who do I need to be for this person so they like me? And instead really kind of lost a connection with who I am. And it resulted in a relationship that really was the perfect lesson to show me how much this was preventing me from growing, because I knew that this friendship wasn't one that was right for me. And then I kept trying to make it work, and I kept trying to make this other person happy. And they ended up really attacking my character, quite honestly. And that was tough. That resulted in probably crying every day for about 6 months, because it just was the weight of having to really face, having this opportunity to face how much this habit of people pleasing and changing myself to fit what other people wanted it showed me how much that was completely preventing me from making the kind of difference that I wanted to make. And those are the parts of our, when I'm talking about uncomfortable growth, these are the things that some of these deeply, deeply rooted habits and patterns have, they've run the show for a while, so they don't go easily. They go kicking and screaming. And this was probably, my biggest lesson over the last 2 years. But in looking back, I know that person and that relationship came into my life for such a beautiful reason. And had I not learned that lesson, had I not been able to step back and say, okay, whoa, what was my role in this? And how can I take some responsibility here? Because this is so not about the other person. It's 100% about me. And some of my biggest breakthroughs and biggest opportunities to now form new relationships and new partnerships came from the messy, messy lessons that I learned in that relationship. And I mean, those are just a couple of the examples where I really resisted the discomfort. But I think I started to learn that some of the best outcomes came from leaning into that discomfort. So, just a few other examples that I personally have dealt with over the last 2 to 3 years. I mean, this is a more recent one, and I've talked about it before, is just making the difficult decision to pivot in my business. Feeling so clearly that I was meant to pour my time and energy into what we're doing with Powerhouse Women and free up time to do things like start this podcast and give my energy fully to what this could become. But it required me to stop putting time and energy into something that I really, really loved, which was my other business. But I felt so clearly for a while that it had been time to move on. And that was so uncomfortable. It was literally like someone making you choose between a favorite child. And even though I knew it was the right move for me, it brought a lot of discomfort up. It brought a lot of feelings that I would be disappointing people, or, I had so much of my identity again tied to my role in that business. And it was uncomfortable, but in now being on the other side of it and having made that decision, I know without a doubt it was the right thing for me. And going back to the point about there's just as much discomfort staying the same and resisting making those difficult decisions, or there's discomfort in leaning into it, and there was, but there have been some huge, huge blessings on the other side of just listening to my intuition and listening to myself, knowing that I really did need to make that pivot. There have been a lot of uncomfortable financial investments where this is where I started to lean more into the feeling that discomfort. If I feel really drawn to something, to making a move or starting a business or whatever it might be, making a financial investment, if I feel really, really strongly that that is the next move for me, but it feels uncomfortable, instead of resisting it like I used to do, I built up this tolerance where I started to learn and really be more comfortable, getting uncomfortable and leaning into those feelings of being stretched. And how that played out this last year was deciding to make some bigger financial investments in things like a business mastermind or hiring different people for our business. But, again, even though I knew what the desired outcome was on the other side, I had a lot of fear come up with it that maybe I wasn't worth it. I wasn't worth making that investment, or the fear that maybe I wouldn't get the return on that financial investment that I was hoping I would get. So again, just, learning to lean into things that feel 100% aligned but absolutely stress me or not stress me, stretch me, and are having me grow. So the most recent one probably, and this is one that I'm actively just in right now, this is sort of the next space that I'm in with my own growth, is in this season where I've had a lot of success and opportunity start to happen. It's actually triggered a lot of deeper insecurities and doubts. I don't know if you've ever read it, and if I've mentioned it on the podcast, I'll link this book in the show notes, but one of my favorite books, and I go back to it in seasons like this where things are going great and I know I should feel totally just like in the moment and enjoying all of the success or the opportunity. And instead I feel fear, or I feel some like really old, deep-rooted insecurities showing up. There's a book called The Big Leap, and he talks about how, as humans, our mind only allows us to feel a certain threshold of good feelings before it almost triggers like this upper limit problem, as he calls it, or triggers an upper limit where we'll start to sabotage different areas, or we'll find, worry thoughts, or we'll pick, fights, or we'll start judging and complaining. And really it's just our mind not being comfortable yet with the new levels of success or abundance that we're moving into. And we almost have to just check back in and remind ourselves, number one, that like we're okay. We're moving into a new arena, which feels uncomfortable, but this is the way we want to go. And this discomfort has something beautiful on the other side. And that's what I've been honestly kind of surprised by, that I've been feeling a lot lately, is just this upper limit of, okay, all the things that I've ever worked toward are starting to happen. And you would think that would be just the most exciting thing ever. But it's actually just brought up a lot of fear, a lot of insecurity and doubt. And thankfully, I've done a lot of work around this. So now I know to catch it for what it is. But that doesn't mean that there's any less work involved in now moving through it and moving into a place where I can be more comfortable in this next level of success, this next level of abundance. And so if you're feeling any sort of stress around, maybe you're in a similar position where you're starting to move into new realms of relationships and abundance, success, opportunity, that if you're starting to feel uncomfortable, this is the biggest thing I want you to know, especially if you relate to that last one, that it's not a sign that you should stop or slow down, or that people in your life are going to leave if you achieve this ultimate level of success. It's actually just a sign that there's an opportunity to grow and strengthen a muscle around being able to thrive at that new level. And you absolutely can. That's our work as human beings, is to continue to grow that muscle, continue to expand, and continue to just move into new spaces and make bigger impacts. And the whole point of this episode is just that path, no matter how it looks when you're observing someone else's life on social media, I promise you this, that path for anyone who is really doing the work is uncomfortable a lot of the time. But these periods of discomfort have also been the biggest catalysts for some of the most beautiful blessings in my life. At the time, they felt incredibly uncomfortable, and sometimes even painful. But on the other side has come some of the biggest blessings I can even imagine. So I just thought in closing, I would kind of share two things that have really helped me get grounded when I'm in the season of discomfort, and also just help me move through it at whatever pace I need to move through it. And I'm not saying that growth always has to hurt. That's a little extreme, but I think you all know what I mean by just it's uncomfortable. So the first thing that I've found really helps is just my attitude in these seasons. I mean, it makes all the difference in the emotional toll that these phases of growth have on me. And so one of my favorite quotes or sayings, again, this isn't mine, but I just always come back to it, and I don't remember where I initially heard it, but is just the attitude of, I can always choose to see even the most uncomfortable, painful situations when I could easily curl up in a ball and cry and say, why is this happening to me? Is I can always choose to see that situation as happening for me and for my greater good, not to me. So it helps me reframe when I just pause and I ask, like, okay, like for example, just in the messy situation where the relationship kind of blew up and there was, I felt like my character was being attacked. It was really an opportunity. I could have easily played the victim and said, like, why is this happening? This isn't fair. But that gave me no power in that situation. Instead, it was almost a daily practice. I had to remind myself to ask, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I reframe this situation and see the lesson in it? What do I need to learn in order to move forward and become who I'm meant to become? And just that attitude adjustment really helps me switch out of the victim mentality that could be really easy to get caught in, especially when things get uncomfortable. And then the other thing is just community. That has absolutely helped me to move through and just be in these seasons of discomfort. And it's part of the reasons why our motto in Powerhouse Women is that we're not meant to do this alone. Because I think that as humans, our tolerance for discomfort is a lot higher as a group. When we're surrounded by people who have been through what we're currently going through. So if you're finding yourself right now in a season of growing pains or you're just feeling challenged, just know that you don't have to do it alone. And you always have the choice to see the situation you're in as though it's happening for you and for your greatest good, not happening to you. So just remember, you always have that choice, but both choices do involve discomfort. I will be honest. You can choose to stay the same. You can choose to ignore that. Just that feeling that you're meant for more. But be honest, it's uncomfortable to ignore that feeling too. Or you can choose to lean in to that discomfort and to the discomfort of growing and pursuing your bigger purpose. But at least there's potential for a huge blessing on the other side of that choice. So yes, growth is freaking uncomfortable. That is absolutely true. But it is equally true that you are strong enough to handle it, and you do not have to do it alone.